I know that by now Marvel's What If is pretty irrelevant. You probably didn't even remember it existed, but to this day I still think about Ultron and how cool his design was. And that design is the main reason why I'm going to turn this brick of air dry clay into an Ultron figure. Now, before we get started, I need two things. First, a guide like this one to keep the proportions under control, and a little drawing to know what pose we are going to give him. Ultron, being such an imposing villain, demands an imposing pose. Yeah, like that one. And now I can start working on the armature. And with that done, I can start bulking up his body with aluminum foil and air dry clay. Now, at this point I realized something. This is a robot, and even though some people consider me as the best artist in the world, the reincarnate of Michelangelo, the truth is I have some artistic weaknesses, and my main weakness is robots. The problem with robotic characters is that the cleanliness of each part, the symmetry, the details have to be very precise. Any imperfection is very noticeable, so to facilitate the process and make sure that each part looks good, I will make the figure in parts. My lizard brain is not able to process the idea of making a robotic character if it is not done in this way. Of course, this comes with a little problem, and that problem is the pose. Making the pose look natural can be more complicated with this method. With a traditional armature, one builds the figure based on an already determined pose. All the parts are made in response to the pose. Here I have to put all the pieces together and pray to all the gods that in the end they all look good put together. In this case, checking each piece with the guide is extremely important. At this point, with all the leg pieces dry and assembled, I'll fix them in the final pose with fresh clay and super glue. And in order to make those mechanical details, all those lines, I'm going to wrap each part with a thin layer of clay. Once I'm done putting all those lines, I'm going to attach the legs to the torso with the help of this wire, fresh clay and super glue. Then I can make the, diaper thing, add those lines, put the belt, and with that I can start working on the head. If we look closely at this drawing, we can see that the mask is open. And what does that mean? Well, it means that first I have to make Vision's head. I won't go into detail about this part, I'll just say that it was pretty fucking hard. I could say that it was the part that took me the longest, but with a little bit of talent and hope, I managed to successfully finish this task. The next step is to make the mask, and here I have to use all my skill and faith points because, well, to make sure that the mask is the right size, I have to make the mask as if it was on, and for that I will make some thin pieces which I'll put on the head in order to gradually build the mask. I didn't put glue on it, as I said, the mask is not going to stay like that, so I had to make sure that taking it off later would be easy. Then I made these two little things that he has on the sides, and with that all the head pieces were ready to assemble, but at this point I knew that painting the face with all the pieces on was going to be a pain in the ass, so before gluing all those things I decided to paint it. And yeah, as I suspected, it was a pain in the ass, especially painting those lines. That was a fucking torture, and unfortunately this would only be a teaser of what was going to come later with the rest of the body. Then I painted the pupils. For this I always recommend to look at the face from a distance to make sure that the eyes are pointing in the same direction. And before gluing the rest of the pieces, I painted the last remaining details of the face. To attach the head to the body, I'm going to use the always reliable combination of wire, super glue and epoxy. With the head and the neck in place, I was able to make the main chest piece. And as usual with this figure, the most difficult and tedious part was to mark those lines, but seeing how the figure was evolving in front of my eyes made me keep going no matter the struggles. Up to this point everything was going great, the boy was growing strong. And before working on the arms I put those things, I don't know what they are, but they are there, so I have to make them. The arms are going to follow a very similar process to the legs. In this case I'm going to make the bicep, forearm and hand separately, and then glue them with the help of a wire and super glue. According to this, the right hand will be holding the double-edged Mega Spear of Destruction, so first I have to make its handle in order to be able to sculpt the hand. So for this I'll grab a piece of wire with glue and clay, and once it dries I'll remove the excess so I can start putting more and more details until I get to the point of being able to make the hand. At this point the arms were already hardened, and as with the legs I rubbed them with thin layers of clay to make these lines with the needle. The arms were not particularly difficult, but having done these lines to the rest of the body with just that fucking needle was starting to give me a little scar in my finger. Making these lines left me with physical and psychological damage from which I'm not sure if I'll recover. So, a small recommendation: if you're going to do this kind of details in any figure, do it using a tool that has a proper grip. Next was to make the two parts of the Mega Spear, and I still don't understand why he would need this. He has all the Infinity Stones and can travel through the multiverse. I guess it is just an aesthetic decision. I won't deny it, it looks great. Anyway, just like 90% of this figure, the best course of action was to let the main shapes dry before adding any detail. Of course, being such large pieces, they took about 2 days to dry, and even then they didn't dry completely, but enough to be able to maneuver them easily and make all the details without any problem. And as a last detail of the main sculpt, I had to make the shoulders. They were not very difficult to do. Fortunately, I found this fat marble that helped me with the curved shape of the shoulders. At this point I had the head, shoulders, arms, spear and the rest of the body completely ready to assemble, but I decided that painting each part individually before assembling would be the best course of action, and that's because for this figure I wanted to do something special with the painting. I could have assembled the figure, painted it all in silver and called it a day, but I am a risky man. I am a brave man who is not afraid of challenges, and I say this because I wanted to capture a bit of that what if animated look by doing an ancient painting technique that only the masters dominate, called cel shading. You probably have heard or have seen examples of it. It is very popular in the Naruto fandom, where there are people who repaint figures with this style to make them look like they're taking out of the animation. Of course, it requires a lot of mastery when it comes to putting the tones in the right areas. If one gets too excited, the figure will end up looking like a post-impressionist mess. But on the other hand, if one is very cautious and does not apply sufficient contrasting tones, the figure will look lame. In this case, the challenge I had was to make the armor look like metal, so I looked for some reference, and based on that I painted the shadows and reflections of the armor. I would say that the most critical and tedious part of this whole process was, of course, to paint all these lines. Controlling that the thickness was consistent was extremely tricky, tedious and hard, but fortunately I was blessed with a pulse that any surgeon would envy. So yeah, this is the most complex painting job I've done for the channel. All of this sucked a good part of my time in this existential plane, but in the end I succeeded and I was very satisfied with the result. And now that all the pieces are ready, I can start putting them together. So I'm going to start by inserting a wire into the left arm in order to attach it to the torso. Of course, I'm going to put some epoxy on it to make it more stable, and then I can make these things here. I had not been able to make this because I needed the arm to be in place. Then I'll put some glue here, followed by a blob of black clay, followed by more glue, followed by the shoulder pad, and everything I just said was done with the other arm as well. At this point I've already put too many hours into this figure and I just want to finish it. So for the base I'll try to make something simple, like some sort of wasteland, and for this a bunch of blobs of clay, texture with an aluminum foil ball, which then get glued together will do. And before painting the base I'm gonna carve the holes for where the feet would be attached. The base will receive a yellowish ochre as a base tone, followed by some shadows with a darker tone. Of course I'll try to keep the whole animated aesthetic thing for the base too. And finally it is time to glue the figure onto the base. For this I'm just going to put a couple of screws on the feet, which will be wrapped with some epoxy, followed by some drops of super glue, and that's it. I would like to say that at this point the figure was already finished, but Ultron is a villain who cares about style. And when he made his armor, he also decided to make a cape, so that's the next step. I won't go too deep into this cape thing. I think it is a topic that could cover an entire video, especially when it comes to making capes in air-dry clay. I will only say that this can of paint was essential to flatten the clay. I also have to say that because of the size of the cape, I had to do it in parts, but beyond that, everything went well. And that's it! Do you like it? I like it. I am talented and this is the evidence. I am a god. Okay, leave a like, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave you with some photos of the figure. Okay, bye!